Hey guys, Movie Wiz here. In today's video, I will be telling you the story of the horror thriller film, Dead End. Spoilers ahead. Enjoy the video. The movie starts with the Harrington family, Frank and Laura with their kids Richard and Marion together with her boyfriend Brad, all traveling to Grandma's house on Christmas Eve. Driving on an unknown road with his family sleeping, he falls asleep and nearly collides with another car traveling in the opposite direction. Fortunately, no one is hurt and the other car is nowhere to be seen. He goes out to check for any damages in the car as Laura wonders where they are. Frank admits he has taken a different way that he assumes may be a shortcut. He also refuses to let anyone else drive the car. They continue their journey as nothing happened. On their way, Richard complains that he's already starving and Marion seems to not be feeling well. Brad tries to comfort her as Richard fools around accusing Brad of being gay. Laura tries to lighten the mood by making all of them sing the Jingle Bells song when suddenly Frank sees a woman dressed in white in the woods. He drives back but finds no one there. A few seconds later, the woman appears at his window. The woman is unresponsive when Frank asks her if she is okay as she is wounded on her forehead. He asks anyone to see if they can contact 911 on their phone, but Brad says there isn't any signal. He then invites the woman to ride with them to the cabin not too far away. As there is no more space in the car, Marion decides to give up her seat to smoke and just walk towards the cabin as she is experiencing traveling sickness anyway. Back in the car, Laura tries to offer the woman a coffee, but she only gives a cold stare as a response. Laura then tells Frank that the woman may be in shock and needs to get help immediately. Frank then stops at a roadside cabin as they attempt to get any sort of response from the woman, but to no avail. While Richard leaves to go play with himself in the woods, Frank and Laura enter the cabin, which leaves Brad alone with the woman and her baby in the car. Back in the car, Brad tries to have a small talk with the woman, and when he sees a ring on her finger, he then proceeds on telling her about his plan to propose to Marion. At the same moment, Marion is walking along the road going over the things she will say when she breaks up with Brad. At the cabin, Frank tries to use the phone, but it isn't working as well. Meanwhile, the woman starts to talk to Brad, telling him that her baby's name is Amy and passes her to him. Brad wonders how the baby can breathe with all the blankets covering her, and the woman tells him that the baby is dead. Confused about the woman's reply, he laughs but then decides to open the blanket. He screams loudly when he discovers the baby's horrendous appearance with blood all over her, confirming that the baby is dead indeed. Richard hears the scream as Laura and Frank storm out of the cabin and sees no one in the car, which means Brad and the woman are missing. Along the road, Marion notices a black hearse and surprisingly sees Brad at the back of it crying for help. She dashes to the cabin to tell their family to go after the hearse that got Brad. As Frank speeds off to go after it, he suddenly stops the car to check the bump in the road. They then discover that the bump is Brad's body, and Marion passes out when she sees him in his horrendous state. Desperate for help, Frank and Richard try to get Brad's phone by poking it with a stick. Laura then uses the phone to call 911, but the other line is just a woman begging for help. Terrified and shaking, Laura throws the phone away, breaking it. She then tells Frank that they should leave the place as the phone is not working, hiding the truth about the call. Before they leave, Frank orders Richard to drag Brad's body to the side of the road. Richard objects, causing Frank to smack him in the face. Still in shock, Laura tries to wake Marion up by slapping her multiple times and only stops when Frank tells her to. They all get back in the car, still taking the same unknown road Frank has driven the car to. Along the road, Frank notices a sign saying Marcotte and tells Richard to check it on the map, but they find no information about it whatsoever. After a brief argument regarding who is to blame for their current predicament, Frank just follows his instinct and decides to drive to Marcotte. Still, in a state of confusion, the family keeps driving with no other cars on the road that seems endless. They check the clock on the dash, but it stopped at 7:30, and all other clocks stopped at that time. Richard then makes a serious insinuation about alien activities, but no one reacts to it. Out of the blue, Marion starts to sing the Jingle Bells song in a monotonous tone, and Laura, being a supportive mother, joins her. As they drive along the never-ending road, they unexpectedly see a black baby stroller in front of them. Frank tries to get out, but Laura stops him as she thinks it's not a good idea. But Richard decides to go towards the stroller and pretends that he got eaten inside it, pranking his parents. In the heat of the moment, Laura and Frank engage in a quarrel again when Laura worries about how Brad's mom will feel when she finds out about Brad's gruesome death. Meanwhile, Richard attempts to talk to Marion, who is still in shock and unresponsive, and tells her how badly they need her to get out of the misery they're in. Richard then sees the stroller back on the road, and they all decide to keep moving as panic slowly creeps in. He and Laura begin another heated argument as the road does not seem to end. They also hear a baby crying on the radio and turn it off. Frank continues to argue with Laura, who still blames him for getting stuck on this unknown road on Christmas Eve. He then tells her how much he hates visiting her family and being forced to talk to her brother, who plays himself with a magazine. The argument only stops when they hit yet another bump in the road, and on the spur of the moment, Marion tells the family she's pregnant, followed by Richard, who admits he's doing drugs. Laura worries where Richard is as Frank changes the car's tire, and Frank jokes that he's probably smoking dope. Meanwhile, Richard is smoking in the forest when suddenly the woman in white appears in front of him. She starts to kiss him, ripping his lower lip off, causing blood to drip from his mouth. He then tells her he loves her, and when the woman lets her clothes drop off and reveals herself nude, Richard is taken aback and terrified. Back in the road, Marion recognizes the black hearse and comes back to senses as they all panic when they see Richard at the back of it screeching for help. They all run back to the car to go after it but encounter yet another bump in the road. They stop and tears start to flow in their eyes when they see Richard's mutilated body. Laura, while she grieves and attempts to rouse Richard as if he is still alive, reveals that Richard is not Frank's son but the fruit of a previous affair. Regardless, the body was placed in the back of the car, with Frank claiming that Richard was still his son. Marion, who appears to be back in her normal self, unwraps a gift and hands it over to Frank. Frank is relieved to see that it is a shotgun and immediately begins loading it with bullets. Back on the road, Laura begins to act strangely, devouring a whole pie in a sloppy manner and saying that Richard's real name is supposed to be Michael. They then pass the same markout sign along the road and Laura, still acting strangely, shows her drawing of Brad. Frank shares a ghost story to Marion, believing that the woman in white is haunting them. They stop for a moment as Laura throws up and suddenly grabs the shotgun, pointing it at Frank. Still not in her sanity, Laura gets triggered when Frank confirms that Richard is dead and shoots a bullet in his leg. Marion administers first aid to Frank, attempting to remove the bullet from his leg. Frank resumes driving, relieving the pain in his leg with a bottle of champagne. He soon realizes that they're in a naval facility and that they're on a military route, which explains why the location isn't shown on the map. Marion falls asleep, and when she wakes up abruptly, she panics when she doesn't see Frank in the driver's seat. Showing signs of hope, Frank shows a map to Marion, telling her that Marcotte is on the coast and that they can reach it within an hour. Laura wakes up and tries to cheer Frank up, but reveals that Frank also had an affair, which she accepts. Laura seems to act normal for a second, but then begins to tell them about the imaginary people who she says look sad in the woods. Back on the road, Laura begins to talk about seeing her friend who died 20 years ago in the woods. She demands to see her friend who has passed away, and when Frank refuses, she jumps out of the moving vehicle. They stop to go after Laura, but she disappears out of the blue. As they look for Laura, they see the black hearse again, and Frank quickly gets the shotgun to shoot at it. The hearse stops for a second and Laura appears, walking slowly towards them. Disheveled, Laura tells them that she's okay, but Frank notices blood on her head. As she turns around, they see her brain exposed from the back of her head while she rubs it with her hands. She goes down and dies with her eyes open. Emotional for a moment, Frank storms to the car to get the shotgun and avenge his family, but Marion convinces him to get back on the road until they reach Marcotte without stopping. They put Laura's body in the car and start driving again. As he smokes inside the car, he tells him about the man named Alan who is Laura's affair. Terror starts to creep in as they have driven 60 miles but have not reached the coast yet. As the road seems endless, he then suggests they walk into the woods instead. They come across a fence, and when they see the vehicle approaching from afar, they rush over to seek for assistance, only to be dismayed when they see their own car. Frank sees that the headlight is turned on and thinks that someone is messing with them. He goes inside to check on Laura's corpse and freaks out when he sees her eyes are opened again. Having no other choice, they go back on the road, and this time, Marion is driving. Inside the car, Frank decides to write the things he wants to do after this nightmare. He suddenly tells Marion to stop the car when he sees the same cabin they went through earlier. He goes inside and lights a match, enraged and convinced that someone is playing with them. The woman in white appears from nowhere and blows it out. Frank picks one of the axes inside the room and begins swinging it around the pitch-black room. Marion hears the noise and goes inside with her flashlight and gets hit by Frank unintentionally. Marion calms him down, giving him a warm hug as they leave the cabin. They walk towards the car, and now Frank, like Laura, shows that he too is beginning to lose his sanity. He starts punching her until she is unconscious, and when Frank comes to his senses and puts Marion inside the car, he then notices the woman in white walking through the woods and quickly grabs his shotgun. He starts shooting and screaming in the woods, but the swishing of a bladed weapon is heard, indicating that Frank has also been killed. Marion suddenly wakes up and quickly starts the car when she hears someone possibly saying that Frank is dead. She starts driving fast when the car suddenly runs out of gas. She gets out of the car and picks up a pen on the ground. As blood drips above, she looks up and screams and begs the person responsible for the death of her family to kill her as well. On the road, she sees the bodies of her family and bags all lined up. The black hearse arrives and Marion sees the woman in white behind her, telling her that the hearse is not there for her. The woman gets inside the hearse and leaves. She sees a car, which appears to be theirs, approaching, and when it is about to hit her, she wakes up in a hospital, appearing that the ordeal that she experienced was just a dream. A man dressed in black asks the doctor about Marion's condition, also saying that he's the one that called the accident in. The doctor confirms that Marion was in a coma for a few hours but is doing all right. The accident began when Frank, the father, fell asleep behind the wheel and collided with a car driven by a woman and her kid. He then thanks her for taking care of Marion, who is the only one to survive the accident and is also pregnant. He asks for her name and she says her name is Dr. Marcotte. which happens to be the same road sign that the family saw in Marion's dream. They both leave the hospital and go to their own cars in the parking lot. When Dr. Marcotte is having trouble starting the car, the man offers her a lift in his own car, which also appears to be the same as the black hearse that Marion has dreamed about when she was in coma. The movie ends with two road sweepers cleaning up after a terrible vehicle accident, and one of them comes across a scrap of paper that Frank had written about, leading us to believe that the dream was actually real. And there you have it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more movie recaps like this. Good night.